I thought that this article in the November 2013 issue of More magazine was really excellent. It caught my attention because it was talking about the hidden cause of chronic illness. And one of the main causes of chronic illness that often goes unnoticed or undiagnosed is domestic violence. Women often hide it, and the doctors and the nurses and even the dentists, they don't even ask the person about it or
It's like the
comment
elephant
about it.
standing in the room that nobody sees.
So you might be surprised that some of the health effects, I know that I was when I was reading this article, even for women that have been fortunate enough to leave their spouse, many years later, like the woman that wrote this article, she goes by the name of Sarah. But even years later when the woman thinks that the violence is over.
I see that in my practice all the time, Vicki. People 10, 20, 30, sometimes even 50 years after something like that's happened, it sticks with them, and they're still all revved up and have lots of work to do that stems from that. It's amazing.
Well, post-traumatic stress disorder doesn't just affect the military.
Right.
And it can affect not only the spouse, but the children also that are witnessing it. Because, stress is just really toxic. And we're going to talk about some of the diseases that are caused from domestic violence. But first, let's talk about how widespread domestic violence is.
Some of the numbers in this magazine just shocked me. We're looking at 25% of people, all American women, 25%. Have had a problem with domestic violence. About 2 million people a year are injured. 1/4 of them, Vicki, require medical care, and 1,300 people a year die from it. The emergency room statistics on this show that 60% of these women have been strangled, and 1/3 of them enough so that they lost consciousness. So we're looking at something here that's unbelievably serious, and it's happening all around us, and nobody's attuned to it.
Well, to be strangled is a pretty horrible, awful thing. In fact, Sarah was talking about how she had been strangled, and the doctors and the nurses didn't even question or ask her about it.
Broken bones and fractures and contusions.
But I wanted to talk about the strangulation because it makes people afraid about smothering. I mean, it even made her afraid to go on airplanes. 30 years later, she was still afraid because of that feeling. But also it causes memory loss, and it can cause strokes and other things,
Well, I mean, look what's happening physiologically here. When we see these women in the emergency room, or even after that, we're looking at women that at age 30 look like they're at age 40, or those that are 40 are looking at age 50. Their physiological age is about a decade older than they are chronologically.
It affects their DNA.
Right. There was a study done at UCSF in San Francisco that showed that the telomeres, which are the ends of the chromosomes that have this little structure on it, when those chromosome telomeres are shortened, life expectancy goes down. They also spend a lot more money, Vicki, and they're spending 20% more money, and they have about 2.7 diseases per person compared to 1.7 for women who have not had domestic violence.
Well, maybe we should talk about what some of these diseases are. One of the reasons that people have all these diseases isn't just from being socked or the trauma.
Although a lot of it is, but you're right.
Yeah, but some of it is from the chronic release of the cortisol because it's disrupting all the hormones.
Right. These women are in chronic hyper-rev states. They're hypervigilant, and what comes with that is a whole lot of stress that's stimulated by the cortisol and stimulated by the adrenaline and nor-adrenalin and other hormones that are stress hormones. If you're under stress for a period of just a week or two, your body will work better, and that's what stress was designed to be like. But when you're stressed more than that, like 2 to 4 weeks or longer, sometimes decades, you're looking at the effects on the body that are the results of chronic inflammation. So you're seeing things like arthritis and GI problems and
high
hypertension.
blood pressure and
Type 2 diabetes and osteoporosis. And of course, depression doesn't surprise anybody, but cognitive defects. So this business of what happens during this period of time is profound.
And the other thing that's pretty scary is that it's really difficult for these women to get away from their abusive spouses. That's when a lot of times we see, homicides.
Oh, right. Well, you have to look at what's happening here. I mean, why do men get into this kind of position to start with? You can imagine how much we need to know about what happened to those young men in their lives to make them have so much violence in them that they strike out against the people that they love.
Well, some of it is a vicious cycle because some of them, I'm not saying that everybody that's brought up in a violent home becomes violent,
Right.
but many of them, that's what
learned.
they've learned. They
Yeah.
see their dad do it, and so that's what they do. And the girls see their mothers taking it, and so that's what they do. I have a really good friend, and that's what happened to her. In fact, her father used to beat her. And so when she grew up, she always found men that would beat her up.
Yeah,
I
it's-
mean, she was married a couple times. Both of her husbands did that. She dated in between and after and so forth. She would always find the guy that would beat her up.
But she'd learned to expect that. It was just like it was a way of life. And she actually, I think, Vicki, was in a comfort zone because she knew how to navigate in that situation and didn't know how to navigate when she was being treated properly.
I know. She
There was-
told me one time that she was dating somebody that got drunk, and then he started to beat her up, and she said that scared her the most.
Lost of control.
But she also said that men that weren't that way many times were boring for her.
Were boring. Yeah, right.
Well, you know.
Well, that shows you how profound the illness is. And what we need to do is find ways to treat these women. And of course, there are safe houses, which definitely should be used, and then psychotherapy. And what I think is even better a lot of the time is what's called somatic experiencing. And if you want to learn more about that, go to the website at drsabuto.com and put it in there because it's a beautiful way to work this through.
And many of these women later on down the line, they have new fears that come up. And what happens is that the new fears trigger the old fears.
Right.
And then they cause sensations of pain. So how does that work?
Oh, that's amazing. See, it's the amygdala, Vicki, that holds all these emotional
That's in the
fears.
brain.
Yeah, it's a center of the brain for emotion. And what it does is it weaves together all these fear experiences and hypersensitizes the nervous system when it comes to pain and causes something called neuropathic pain. So a small stimulus can cause a very large response. It makes it look like these people can't stand even little bits of pain, but it's because their nervous system is sensitized. So it's a really big challenge. And I might just add here, infrared light therapy is something that should be considered in this situation because it works well, in my experience, for neuropathic pain.
Well, I think out of this that doctors and nurses, other healthcare practitioners and dentists also need to be aware of how serious this problem is and then ask and create like a safe atmosphere for these women so that they can talk about it and get some help because they need help to get away from this situation to protect themselves because
Right.
it's going to either ruin their entire life or kill them.
Right. Well, even the United States Preventive Services Task Force has made a policy that says that all women who are in childbearing age groups should be screened for domestic violence. When we look at 25% of the population as being a victim of domestic violence, that's no small number.
Okay, so it ages you. You can get diseases from the injuries. You can get diseases from this constant cortisol that's
Hypersensitive nervous system.
all the time.
There are lots of reasons why.
Oh, and all the other thing I wanted to say was that the other thing is that women end up taking medications for their ailments, and then many times they get side effects from the medications that they're taking.
Yeah.
So,
Well, you've got to get down to the root cause of what's going on. What I want to leave you with, what Vicki and I want to leave you with, is that this is a common problem in our society, and there's a lot we can do about it. And we should be doing more in our schools to make it possible for kids who are beginning to experience this at home and are learning how to develop these behavior patterns will get them into trouble. And if we do that, we'll be going back to the root cause of why people get like that. And if we can do that, that's the way to put an end to the cause of domestic violence.